Hi, and welcome to Creepy Crime Story, where the darkest truths aren't imagined. They're real. February 8th, 2025. Seward, Nebraska. A town so quiet it almost forgets to echo. The sidewalks were crusted with a thin layer of sleet, sun just cracking the edge of the horizon when a call came through to the Seward County Dispatch. A woman from North 5th Street reported something odd. Her neighbor's porch light had been left on all night. The car still parked in the driveway since the day before, and now the back door looked slightly open. Nothing overtly dramatic, just off. Enough to make her uneasy. Dispatch coded it for a welfare check. No immediate concern. No lights and sirens urgency. Deputy Alec McCready was first on scene. He knocked. No response. Walked the perimeter. The snow by the back porch was disturbed, one small patch flattened beneath a heavy step. The door gave way without resistance. It hadn't been kicked in, hadn't even been forced. It had been opened, with a key or a quiet hand. Inside, the temperature was average. No sound, no motion. He stepped into the living room. That's where he saw her. Jamie Hagan, 36, was lying prone on the laminate floor. Blood had dried in sharp contrast against the blonde wood. The pool, dark and static, coagulated. Her right arm was tucked underneath her chest, left arm curled beside her, a position not fallen into but collapsed. Nearby, 4 shell casings, .40 caliber. Grouped close together, tight, practice shots. No overturned furniture, no defensive wounds later found, no call made, no struggle recorded. Death had been swift. Her phone sat on the kitchen island, screen still unlocked but dim. Later forensic recovery would show her last text was sent at 11:34 p.m. the night before. It read, "He's out. If anything happens, tell the girls I love them." That was it. No punctuation. Just a final, quietly panicked declaration. She didn't call 911. She didn't run. She didn't even leave the house. Jamie Hagan was a mother, divorced with 2 daughters, ages 9 and 12, who by some grace of fate were staying with their grandparents that night. She worked a clerical position at a local insurance agency. No criminal record, no known substance abuse. Her colleagues called her reliable, quiet, guarded. She kept things to herself. But some knew there had been someone in her life, a relationship that had turned volatile in the fall of 2024. A name had come up in whispers. A protective order had been filed 2 months before. When crime scene techs arrived, they found little more than what Deputy McCready had already observed. No forced entry, no evidence of ransacking, no signs of Jamie attempting to flee. The house was clean. The windows were locked from the inside. The only irregularity, the security system had been disconnected 3 weeks earlier. There was no footage from her own cameras. However, one of the neighbors had a Ring doorbell camera that captured a single figure, tall, wide-shouldered, walking toward Jamie's home at 12:47 a.m. The image was partially obscured, the hedges blurring the frame, but the silhouette was clear enough. No footage of that figure leaving the property ever appeared. Analysis of Jamie's phone showed that it stopped transmitting data at 12:51 a.m., likely powered off or disabled. The Wi-Fi disconnected at 12:52. By 1:10 a.m., the house had gone dark entirely. Her inbox showed no signs of harassment. However, a forensic analyst flagged a deleted WhatsApp conversation dated April 30th, 5 days earlier. Recovery tools revealed the final outgoing message. "I said no. Please leave me alone. I'm done." Recipient unknown, number was unregistered, likely a burner phone. A request to telecom providers was filed. No shell casing showed fingerprints. No DNA was recovered on site beyond the victims. No sign of forced entry, staging, or property theft. Whoever fired those 12 rounds didn't break in. They waited outside. Detective Lisa Salgado of the Harris County Sheriff's Homicide Division was assigned primary. She described the initial scene like this. She wasn't robbed. She wasn't caught in crossfire. She was ambushed in her own driveway. And whoever did it didn't flinch. That many shots, tight grouping? That's not fear. That's intent. 2 hours into processing, a minor anomaly surfaced. The SUV seen in neighbor footage, it was also captured on a traffic cam 3 blocks south. earlier the same evening at 11:43 p.m. Same silhouette, same body type. The timestamp put it less than 400 yards from Kalencia's home over 2 hours before she arrived. That meant someone waited, in the dark, for hours. No one in the neighborhood saw a face. No one reported footsteps, raised voices, or confrontation. Just sudden gunfire and silence. Kalencia Davidson was a mother of 10, a survivor of domestic violence, an employee of the state criminal justice system, and as of May 5, 2025, she became the central figure in Harris County's most calculated homicide that year. In towns like Atascocita, murders aren't just crimes. They unravel families, gut whole streets. This wasn't random, and that's what scares people. By 9 a.m. on May 5th, the crime scene had been cleared. Yellow tape came down. The body had been transported, but the investigation was just beginning. Detectives turned their attention inward, to the victim's life, her routines, her risks. In homicide cases with no immediate suspect, no direct witness, and no murder weapon recovered, the first logical step is victimology. Kalencia Davidson's personnel file from the Texas Department of Criminal Justice offered a structured portrait, punctual, competent, professionally respected. No disciplinary actions. She had worked in offender intake and parole support since 2021, transferred from administrative services following what her supervisor described as personal circumstances that required greater schedule flexibility. She was, by all accounts, meticulous. She kept records. She didn't engage in office gossip. Her life outside of work, however, revealed a different pattern, more complex, less controlled. The forensic team began constructing her behavioral timeline from digital footprints, text logs, social media posts, cloud-stored images, and app metadata. Her phone, processed by the Regional Digital Analysis Unit, showed increased texting activity between April 25th and May 2nd. Notably, several threads had been deleted. The device had no anti-forensic software installed, suggesting the deletions were manual, not automated. Software reconstructed fragments from the WhatsApp cache, revealing a recurring contact not stored in her phone book. The number had used a temporary VoIP service registered through a U.S. anonymizer. Recovered lines included April 28th, 10:47 p.m. I told you I'm not going back. I need space. You don't control me anymore. April 30th, 8:15 p.m. Stop circling my house. The kids see it. I'm documenting this. This was flagged as a potential threat dynamic. The messages were routed to behavioral analysts specializing in intimate partner violence. The context suggested ongoing surveillance, verbal coercion, and indirect intimidation, consistent with pre-homicidal behavior in domestic stalking cases. Investigators interviewed immediate family. Her eldest daughter, age 21, disclosed that Kalencia had recently installed outdoor lighting and was thinking about getting cameras back up, but hadn't done so due to cost. She said her mother seemed relieved lately, but still checked the locks 3 times every night. When asked if Kalencia feared someone, the response was immediate. Yes, but she wouldn't file again. Last time it didn't help. A 2021 protective order was found in court archives. It had been filed but later dropped. According to the initial affidavit, the respondent had made verbal threats, showed up unannounced at Kalencia's workplace, and once waited inside her garage for over an hour. No physical assault had been recorded, but the language in the affidavit was clear. I believe he will kill me if I try to leave again. There had been no charges, no follow-up prosecution, no enforcement actions. The respondent's name was redacted in the publicly viewable record, but detectives obtained the unredacted file and flagged it for cross-reference with forensic data in progress. Meanwhile, data from Kalencia's Uber Eats account showed a sharp spike in nighttime orders between March and May 2025. She stopped leaving the house after 8 p.m., even on weekends. Neighbors confirmed she barely stepped outside except to go to work and back. In stalking cases, behavioral modification, like changing routines or increasing isolation, is a key marker of fear. The investigative team noted this pattern as corroborating evidence that she anticipated danger and had taken steps to mitigate exposure, even without formal help. From a forensic psychology perspective, this kind of behavioral shift doesn't emerge in isolation. It escalates, typically when prior intimidation fails to reestablish control. Detective Lisa Salgado described the case notes in a field memo. It reads like she knew something was coming, but couldn't prevent it. Not random, not opportunistic. We're looking at a behavioral pattern that suggests stalking with an endgame. The internal threat assessment form now categorized the case as targeted femicide with stalking prelude. That classification triggered a second layer of forensic inquiry, checking for device pings from known contacts in the vicinity of the crime scene during the window of the attack. Back at headquarters, the team sifted through Calencia's Google location history. Most entries were routine: school pickups, grocery runs, parole office. One anomaly stood out. On April 27th, her phone had pinged off a tower near her old address, an apartment complex she hadn't lived in since 2022. She stayed for less than 3 minutes. No recorded call or text was sent during that time. The investigators flagged it. Sometimes victims circle back to previous danger points for closure or to confirm whether someone else is watching them. The apartment complex was visited. No known ties. But security logs showed an SUV idling in the lot 20 minutes before Calencia arrived. Similar body shape to the one spotted near her current home. No license plate captured. Still, the overlap was enough to validate the profiling assessment. At this point, the investigation began to define itself not just by the crime, but by the pattern behind it. The team wasn't just searching for a shooter, they were reverse engineering a mindset. The data aligned too cleanly. Sometimes that was the problem. By the morning of May 6, 2025, the incident had already escalated beyond a local tragedy. What started as a targeted homicide in a residential neighborhood was now a structured investigation with an expanding forensic footprint. Surveillance review, geolocation triangulation, and cellular metadata. Each line of inquiry now operated in parallel. The homicide team wasn't just chasing motive. They were isolating movement. The primary forensic focus in Chapter 3 was mobility. The black SUV captured on a neighbor's Ring camera, idling on Upper Lake Drive just before the murder. Its presence was too precise to be coincidence. No license plate was captured, no driver visible, but its route had a digital trail. Traffic camera footage from Timber Forest Drive, a feeder road into Calencia-Davidson subdivision, was pulled and enhanced. Timestamp May 5, 2025, 1:44 a.m. The same SUV, make-believed to be a dark Chevrolet Traverse or Ford Edge, late model, no front plate, was logged entering the area from a westbound intersection. 4 minutes later, another camera picked it up again, circling a block and cutting through an unlit side street. The total time in the vicinity was over 30 minutes. Then it disappeared. Harris County's surveillance network, while limited in suburban zones, could still establish pattern routing. An analyst at the Real-Time Crime Center mapped every camera ping from 1:30 to 2:20 a.m. in a 2-mile radius. What emerged was not just direction, it was waiting. The SUV paused in position, moved forward, then reversed. It wasn't navigating, it was surveilling. The route was methodical. Detectives requested toll booth data for the preceding 3 hours. One outbound entry northbound on Beltway 8 had recorded a matching vehicle body type at 12:09 a.m. Again, no plate captured. A toll pass wasn't scanned, which suggested cash payment or toll evasion. While not definitive, the pattern now reflected premeditation, route masking, plate concealment, avoidance of detection points. Simultaneously, cell tower logs were requested from a 500-meter radius surrounding Upper Lake Drive between 1:30 and 2:30 a.m. This process, known as a tower dump, returns anonymized data from every device connected to the tower during the target window. Out of 97 unique device IDs logged in that time frame, 92 were excluded based on known resident patterns, delivery workers, and time-stamped geofencing from app permissions. 5 device IDs remained. Of those 5, only one showed no consistent prior presence in the area across the last 30 days. It appeared just once, between 1:48 and 2:16 a.m. Its movement matched the same route as the SUV. Investigators obtained a warrant to unmask the owner. Within 24 hours, the telecom provider identified the user account as registered to a prepaid burner phone. The account had been activated only 10 days earlier and showed no outbound calls or texts. However, the device's metadata pinged one specific tower on the night of the murder, and that tower had also serviced Colencia Davidson's residence the week prior. The forensic implication was clear. The device had been within close proximity to her home before. The same burner phone had been used to monitor the neighborhood at least twice before the night of the shooting. Detective Lisa Salgado logged this development in her case summary. The SUV wasn't just passing through. It was linked to a device actively surveilling the area. That establishes intent. The investigators expanded their scope. A city-operated license plate reader, LPR system outside a business plaza, roughly 3 miles away, had captured a dark SUV parked along a curb on April 30th. It was the only camera angle to return a partial plate, a blurred Texas plate with the final 3 characters, 4ZK. The DMV database returned 12 possible matches. 10 were dead ends, wrong model, wrong body type, or owners with solid alibis. 2 remained under review. Separately, a digital forensic examiner revisited Colencia's phone. On a hunch, they extracted location data not just from her messaging apps, but from her smart home assistant. The device had a connected account with voice-activated reminders and geolocation routines. One routine, lights on at 7 p.m., lights off at 2:15 a.m., had been interrupted the night of the murder. The lights never turned off. The system registered the interruption as a manual override. It was likely triggered when the front motion sensor detected movement, seconds before gunfire. This allowed investigators to create a more precise timeline than initially assumed. Motion detected, 2:12:04 a.m. Gunshots logged by audio sensors, 2:12:18 to 2:12:31 a.m. Total window, under 30 seconds from detection to fatal shot. Colencia Davidson never made it to her front door. She was ambushed within seconds of stepping out of her car, while her smart home assistant tracked every detail. The question now was how the killer knew exactly when she'd return. Her GPS showed an unpredictable arrival time that night. Her texts gave no clue. Her plans were casual. Investigators began to suspect that her movements were being tracked live. That led to a new request: Apple ID login records. Her phone had not been compromised, but her Find My iPhone access had been triggered by an unknown IP the day before. This access point was traced to a hotel guest Wi-Fi router in the Houston metro area. The implication: someone had logged into her account, or someone who had been previously logged in still had access. Security logs at the hotel were incomplete. The IP trace was insufficient to ID a guest, but investigators had enough probable cause to begin cross-referencing names tied to her iCloud account. Patterns were converging: device, vehicle, access, surveillance. This wasn't impulsive, it was orchestrated. In cases like this, you don't just look for motive, Salgado later said. You look for access and persistence. That's who kills with precision. By May 7, 2025, the investigation had narrowed in scope but deepened in complexity. Detectives were no longer parsing random leads. They were now reconstructing access, who had the means to track Colencia Davidson in real time, and how that access had been acquired. The turning point came through a forensic request submitted to Apple's legal compliance team. Investigators asked for device logins to Colencia's iCloud account during the 72-hour window leading to her death. The report returned one significant anomaly. On May 4th at 10:11 p.m., a login had occurred using her Apple ID credentials from a device not registered to her known hardware. The IP address used was tied to a commercial Wi-Fi network in Northwest Houston, roughly 28 miles from her residence. This wasn't a phishing attempt. It wasn't a password reset. It was an active login from someone who had full access to her account: photos, messages, calendar, location. And it had happened less than 24 hours before the murder. Digital forensic analysts identified the browser agent and device fingerprint. It was a standard Android OS device, likely a burner, with anonymized browsing extensions installed. There was no way to reverse engineer a username from the IP, but the login trail aligned with other data points, namely the tower ping from the burner phone flagged in Chapter 3 and the SUV route identified earlier. In criminal profiling, coincidence can occur, But correlation across three unrelated systems, mobile metadata, vehicle sightings, and third-party account access, indicates deliberate convergence. The individual behind this had patience, technical familiarity, and a plan. Parallel to the digital workup, financial forensics expanded. Colencia had only one credit account and no suspicious activity had been reported. But a deeper scrape of her mobile payment apps revealed an unlinked debit card previously connected to a shared account, closed in 2022. This led investigators to examine archived banking logs, which showed that 2 weeks prior to her death, her former partner had attempted to access the closed account via a mobile login. Access was denied, but the attempt was noted. The pattern was consistent. Attempts to regain control, attempts to re-enter spaces she had already closed. A forensic image of Colencia's laptop showed no malware, but the browser cache logged 5 failed login attempts to her online banking account, all from the same IP that later accessed her iCloud. The timeline matched. The intent was traceable, and it wasn't financially motivated, it was about monitoring. A new subpoena was issued for the Android device tied to the IP logs. Investigators weren't looking for communication this time. They wanted access chains. If this individual had iCloud credentials, they likely also had access to shared apps, mutual location permissions, or linked calendars. Forensic teams cross-referenced login tokens from Google Maps and WhatsApp Business. Colencia's movements on May 5th had been mirrored, real-time, through someone else's device. They didn't need to follow her. They could watch her location change, step by step. They knew when she left the bar. They knew how long she'd be on the road. They didn't guess, one analyst wrote in the internal case memo. They confirmed. With the digital window secured, investigators turned back to physical entry points. The door camera removed before the murder had not been forcibly dismantled. Wires were clipped cleanly. No damage to the frame, no forced break to the mount. The only people who had ever installed or worked on the system were documented in a service log maintained by Colencia through a mobile app. One service technician, one ex-partner, 2 known users. The doorbell camera had required a shared account password for settings modification, also controlled through her iCloud. That removed any doubt about how the system was deactivated prior to the night of the attack. What remained was the timing. Records showed the camera system had gone offline at 11:38 p.m. on May 4th. The iCloud login happened 73 minutes later. Whoever accessed the account had also scheduled the device to remain dormant for a 24-hour period. It was set not to reboot until the morning of May 6th. That setting wasn't random. It was programmed. The conclusion was procedural but inescapable. Colencia Davidson was not just murdered. She was digitally disarmed before she ever stepped out of her car. Cases like this don't begin with bullets. They begin with access. Access to a phone, an account, a routine. That access, when left unchecked, becomes surveillance. And when the law doesn't intervene, it becomes a weapon. By May 8, 2025, the Harris County Sheriff's Office had everything but a face. They had a digital trail, they had a car, they had login data, tower pings, a partial plate, and a timeline that matched too well to be random. What they still didn't have yet was a person definitively tied to the scene. That changed when they mapped the suspect's disappearance. For 3 hours the night Colencia was killed, one individual, previously ruled out due to lack of formal evidence, had no digital or physical alibi. He wasn't at work. His phone had gone dark. No transactions, no pings, no known check-ins. In an era where people generate data constantly, silence isn't neutral. It's planned. Investigators ran cell tower logs from the burner phone connected to the SUV. A match was found to a known associate of Colencia, her former partner. The device hadn't been registered to his name, but the route it took matched his known places of interest, including an apartment complex where he had briefly lived in 2022, and the gas station where he was later arrested. That gas station had no direct link to the crime, but the timing raised flags. Surveillance from the location showed him arriving around 2:32 a.m., less than 20 minutes after the last shot was fired at Upper Lake Drive. The footage showed him alone, filling up a black SUV. Same body type, same lack of front plate. He looked calm. No rush, no attempt to hide. That SUV had been seen days earlier by neighbors on Colencia's block. Law enforcement pulled a records check. The vehicle was a rental, obtained under a different name using a prepaid debit card. The rental had been taken out on May 3rd, returned May 6th, cleaned before return. No forensic evidence was recovered inside, but toll records confirmed the same SUV had passed through Beltway 8, late on the night of May 4th, matching the known time and road of the vehicle seen circling Colencia Street. It wasn't enough to arrest him, but it was enough to build a pattern. Meanwhile, forensic technicians confirmed that one of the burner phones used in the vicinity of Colencia's house had been in use near a public Wi-Fi network on April 30th, the same day she had texted a friend saying, "He's watching again." When asked if Colencia had expressed fear to anyone beyond her circle, her supervisor at the parole office said, "Yes." She asked for a flexible shift starting in March. Said she couldn't be predictable right now. That one line reframed the entire case. She knew. She anticipated. And despite the warnings, no official restrictions were in place. There was no active protective order. Detective Salgado wrote in her incident file summary, "We're not just documenting a murder, we're mapping months of premeditation, layered in silence." The court order to pull GPS history from the suspect's known personal phone, once online again, revealed it had been powered off the night of the murder and remained offline until noon the following day. The pattern mirrored other abuse-driven killings: disappearance during the window of death, followed by a sudden return to normal activity, as if to create distance. Colencia's death was not spontaneous. It followed an arc, a pattern of isolation, digital manipulation, and calculated stalking. In cases like this, intent isn't just proven by actions. It's proven by how those actions disappear from the record. By May 9th, 2025, the case had shifted from a pattern of suspicion to a chain of confirmation. Investigators had built a timeline. Now they needed it to hold in court. Prosecutors weren't just preparing to charge, they were preparing to win. That meant every element had to align: physical evidence, digital data, motive, and opportunity. This was the phase where speculation ended and submission to the DA's office began. The Harris County District Attorney's Office assigned an assistant DA to the case by midday. Their review focused on 4 converging streams: the recovered surveillance, cell tower triangulation, account access logs, and suspect behavior during the critical window. On paper, none of those alone were enough, but together they formed a procedural lattice, one that couldn't be dismantled without breaking the integrity of the timeline. Prosecutors focused first on the device correlation. The burner phone used to mirror Colencia's location had logged movement within 100 meters of her residence across 4 separate dates in late April and early May. That included April 30, the day she had sent a text expressing concern, and the early morning of May 5th, within the hour of the shooting. This phone had never been used to place a call or send a message. Its sole purpose had been silent tracking. Then came the IP logs. Forensic analysts confirmed that the same anonymized Android device had accessed Colencia's iCloud account using an IP tied to a hotel guest network. 2 other devices had accessed the same network within that time frame. One of them, verified through MAC address, was later connected to the suspect's known personal laptop. The forensic team didn't need to prove he typed the credentials. They only needed to confirm he used the pipeline. The prosecution team requested a forensic walkthrough of the suspect's digital footprint. His primary phone, once reactivated, revealed a data blackout from 1:36 a.m. to 11:54 a.m. on May 5th. No apps opened, no signals transmitted, just total dormancy during the homicide window. Afterward, data activity resumed normally. This pattern had occurred before, including on April 27th, the day the surveillance SUV was first caught on traffic cams near Colencia's home. That same SUV, rented under a third-party alias, had been logged by plate readers 3 blocks from her house less than 45 minutes before the shooting. The vehicle was returned on May 6th cleaned. No ballistic residue, no blood. But the rental agency's GPS tracker showed the car had idled for 18 minutes outside a wooded trail near the San Jacinto River, long enough to dispose of evidence. Search efforts at that location yielded nothing on the first pass, but drone mapping from the sheriff's SAR unit identified disturbed soil near the waterline. Investigators recovered a sealed plastic bag containing gloves and a phone case matching the dimensions of the suspect's previous device. Lab testing was still pending, but the timeline now extended beyond the scene. It stretched into concealment. The final procedural step was tying it all together with witness consistency. Calencia's daughter had told investigators her mother was more alert lately, always watching the front of the house. A co-worker testified that she'd mentioned someone showing up in a black SUV again the week before. Even a neighbor recalled the same vehicle parked with its lights off 3 nights in a row. Those weren't just anecdotes. They were pattern confirmations. Each one filled a slot in the broader timeline. The vehicle didn't just arrive the night of the crime. It had been present before, each time aligning with key dates in the digital access log. Each time matching moments when Calencia's behavior shifted toward hypervigilance. By the end of the day, the lead prosecutor approved a charge recommendation: murder in the first degree, with evidence of stalking and digital intrusion. A judge signed the arrest warrant before 6 p.m. Thomas Saunier was taken into custody at his sister's residence without incident. At the moment of arrest, he had no phone, no car, just a folded piece of paper in his pocket with the address of a defense attorney. On May 10, 2025, Thomas Saunier stood in a courtroom for the first time since his arrest. Charged with the first-degree murder of Calencia Davidson, he appeared before a Harris County judge for arraignment. He did not speak. His court-appointed attorney entered a plea of not guilty on his behalf. The prosecution did not expect anything different. The hearing itself lasted just under 15 minutes. The courtroom was under heavy security. Friends and family of the victim sat in silence. Prosecutors had already filed a motion requesting no bond. The evidence presented to justify that request was direct and procedural. Nothing speculative, nothing rhetorical. Surveillance footage, tower dump analysis, forensic data tied to digital intrusion, and the suspect's total data blackout between 1:36 a.m. and 11:54 a.m. on the day of the murder were each introduced in outline form. In support of the no-bond motion, the DA's office referenced multiple factors: stalking history, electronic access to the victim's private accounts, and flight risk due to post-crime concealment behaviors. Saunier's defense team objected, arguing the evidence was circumstantial and lacked physical proof of his presence at the scene. But the court reviewed a sealed declaration from the lead forensic analyst outlining the digital link between the burner phone's IP history and the login credentials used to disable Calencia's home security system. The court ruled in favor of the prosecution. No bail was granted. Saunier would remain in custody. What followed over the next 72 hours was the formalization of the evidentiary file. The prosecution team began preparing for the grand jury review. They weren't working toward a plea. They were building for trial. Their approach was procedural: let the data speak. The autopsy report was finalized on May 11. It confirmed 11 gunshot wounds and 1 superficial graze. All wounds were fired from a consistent left-to-right trajectory, most within a 3 to 6 foot range. The examiner's notation specified no evidence of a struggle, no defensive injuries. She was shot before she could run, possibly before she fully exited the vehicle. Time of death, between 2:12 and 2:13 a.m. That detail matched the smart home motion trigger and audio spike captured by her system, disabled just hours before, but still registering background activity before shutdown. Detectives followed up on a final loose thread, one they had held back intentionally. A set of gloves and a phone case had been recovered from the San Jacinto River shoreline, placed inside a sealed plastic bag. Preliminary DNA swabs had been inconclusive, but trace fiber analysis returned results on May 12. Gunshot residue consistent with .40 S&W discharge was present on the interior of the gloves. No prints, but the sizing, material, and stitching matched gloves found in Saunier's residence during a prior unrelated domestic call in 2022. The brand and cut were the same, a minor point, but in court, consistency builds credibility. By May 13th, the DA's office had submitted the full brief for grand jury review. 23 pages of timeline reconstruction, supported by 7 data logs, 2 witness statements, 6 surveillance timestamps, and 1 cellular access map. They didn't rely on a confession. They didn't rely on a single moment. The weight of the case came from layered precision. Each fact had to land exactly where the next one began. Saunier refused media interviews. In holding, he remained nonverbal except for brief statements to his attorney. He declined the jailhouse phone list. No recorded calls, no messages sent. In cases like this, silence isn't a defense. It's a continuation of the pattern. On May 15, 2025, a Harris County grand jury returned a true bill of indictment against Thomas Saunier for the murder of Kalencia Davidson. The charges reflected the core of the case: premeditation, digital surveillance, and personal access exploited for lethal intent. No plea deal was offered, none was expected. Prosecutors moved forward with the charge of capital murder. Kalencia's case didn't end with the indictment because the questions it raised extended far beyond the courtroom. In the days following the grand jury's decision, internal memos circulated within the Texas Department of Criminal Justice, where Kalencia had worked until the morning she was killed. Supervisors were instructed to reevaluate safety protocols for staff reporting domestic harassment, even off-duty. Until then, requests for modified schedules due to personal safety were reviewed inconsistently. Her file had documented her shift change request in March. The reason listed: personal safety concern. No action had been taken. Her co-workers organized a private memorial. It wasn't publicized. Most didn't speak to press. But inside their office, a small frame photo was placed near the entry desk. A reminder that personal lives don't always stay outside professional walls. Law enforcement officials confirmed that Kalencia's death triggered a reevaluation of protective order enforcement within Harris County. In particular, how often orders are dropped under pressure and how rarely that history is flagged during subsequent calls. In her case, no active order existed in 2025, but the digital and behavioral trail showed the threat had never ended. Kalencia did everything she was supposed to. She reported abuse in the past. She documented harassment. She changed her routines. She installed cameras. She stayed quiet when the system couldn't guarantee her protection. By May 20th, advocacy groups began publicly calling for reform around digital stalking statutes. Texas law currently does not criminalize account intrusion or GPS mirroring unless tied directly to physical violence. Her case demonstrated how these tools, when combined, can escalate from control to homicide without leaving a single visible mark before the final act. In public statements, law enforcement stopped short of making broader claims. But in confidential interagency briefings, Kalencia's case was flagged as a model of pre-murder surveillance escalation. The term is clinical, but important. It reflects a category of homicide in which the victim is watched, tracked, and silenced methodically, often without witnesses and without warning. The suspect, Thomas Saunier, remained in pretrial custody as of May 27, 2025. No trial date had been set. His legal team declined interviews. He had not spoken publicly since his arrest. The last known message he sent was weeks earlier, before the murder, via a burner number to Kalencia. "You don't decide what ends." She didn't get to answer, but everything she documented, every deleted message, every altered routine, every instinct to hide, became the foundation of the case that followed. That documentation didn't save her, but it made sure her silence wouldn't be the final word. Cases like these don't just expose a killer. They expose the moments that were missed, requests not followed up on, access not revoked, accounts not secured. And while none of those alone caused her death, each one opened a door someone else was willing to walk through. Justice in legal terms is still pending, but clarity is not. The facts are fixed, the timeline is mapped, and the warning signs, now that it's too late, are impossible to ignore. Sometimes the signs are there, quiet, subtle, and easy to overlook. But ignoring them doesn't make them go away. If you're ever in a situation that feels unsafe, trust that feeling. Set boundaries. Document everything. Tell someone. And if no one listens, keep speaking, because your life is worth protecting, even when the system hesitates. I hope Kalencia's story reminds us how critical it is to take every warning seriously, not just for ourselves, but for those we love. If this video touched you, drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from, or what part of the story hit you hardest. And if it didn't resonate, I still want to hear your perspective. We grow by listening. And hey, if you found value in this case, please subscribe to the channel. You'll get more real stories, told with purpose, not drama. Stay safe, stay aware.